Today we wander with St. Anthony the Great. He lived from 251 to 356, and his feast day is January 17th. He is the patron saint of basket makers and grave diggers. If you want to be perfect, the Egyptian priest said, sell what you have and give to the poor. Then you will have treasure in heaven. The priest was reading the words of Jesus, and as Anthony listened, they burned in his heart. As soon as the service was over, he got up, went out, and sold almost everything he owned. His parents had been rich before they died, when Anthony was only 18, so he had inherited great wealth from them. He kept only what he thought he and his sister needed to live. Then, at another service, he heard the priest read more of Jesus' words. Do not worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow will worry about itself. Today's trouble is enough for today. So, Anthony found a place for his sister to live with some Christian women. Then he sold everything else he owned and went out into the desert. The devil thought the desert was his territory. He was furious to find a follower of Jesus living in it. So he tried every trick he could think to make Anthony leave. He sent Anthony visions of pleasures he was missing back in town. He sent demons to beat Anthony black and blue. Nothing you do can separate me from God's love, Anthony told them. My heart isn't afraid. When the demons heard this, they began to beat one another. Then the devil sent Anthony visions of terrifying beasts. Suddenly, Anthony's desert cave seemed to be crowded with lions, bears, leopards, snakes, scorpions, wolves, even a charging bull. But Anthony just laughed. If you had any power, one of you would have been enough to do me in, he told the beasts. If you are able, why don't you attack me? And if you're not, why bother me? At his words, a ray of light broke into his cave through the rock overhead, and the visions vanished. But the devil wasn't done yet. Whenever Anthony traveled in the desert, the devil liked to tease him with visions of money, plates full of silver coins and piles of gold chunks. Why would anyone leave a plate of silver in the desert? Anthony said to himself. This must be temptation. And as soon as he thought this, the money vanished. Eventually, other people followed Anthony out into the desert. Anthony didn't want to talk to them or even see them. He just wanted to be alone with God, so he locked himself into an old fort in a mountain. When people gathered outside, they could hear voices speaking to Anthony. What are you doing in the desert? The voices demanded. Do you think you can withstand us? But when the people peeped through the walls of the fort, they only saw Anthony all alone. That's when they realized the voices were the voices of demons. Help us, Anthony, the people cried. There are demons here. Don't be afraid, Anthony called to them. Demons only fight the cowardly. Then Anthony started to sing. Let God arise and his enemies be scattered, he sang. In the name of the Lord, I scatter them. For years, Anthony hid in the fort, and while he did, all sorts of people came out to meet him in the desert, where they hoped to become citizens of heaven. But year after year, Anthony didn't show his face. Finally, the people couldn't stand it any longer. They broke down the door of the fort, and Anthony came out. He healed people who were sick and comforted people who were sad. He helped people settle their differences, and he gave governors and generals advice about how to rule. Some Greeks who had heard of his wisdom and believed that they themselves were very wise came to visit him. How do you become so wise? They asked him, without going to school. Which came first? Anthony asked, the mind or school? The mind, the Greeks said. Then a sound mind is more important than school, said Anthony. Nearby was a man who was sick. Can you heal this man with your arguments? Anthony asked the Greeks. No, they admitted. Anthony prayed to God for help and the man was healed. The Greeks were astonished. Why are you surprised? Anthony asked. I didn't do this, God did. And he will give you his love if you give up your arguments. Anthony's fame spread so far that Emperor Constantine wrote to him begging for a word. The monks who followed Anthony were awestruck that Anthony had gotten a letter from the emperor. But Anthony didn't even want to write back. Don't be impressed by a letter from the emperor, he told them. Be in awe that God gave us his law and spoke to us through his son. Jesus is the only true king. But when Anthony heard that Constantine loved God, he wrote him back. If you want to be a good king, Anthony told Constantine, be merciful, be just, and care for the poor. When Anthony was 105 years old, he told the monks who had joined him in the desert that he was about to die. He wasn't sad or afraid of his death. Instead, he was joyful, as if he was about to set off on an amazing journey. Remember, he told them, don't ever give up trying to know God and do good. And no matter how long you serve God, begin fresh every day, as if you're just starting out for the very first time.